So this session is called the SME Test Project Key Findings. Looks like one of these Netflix type of films. So let's try to see what this is about, right? So I think it's very much at the bottom of the preoccupations of SMEs to have clear legislation to avoid that SMEs are having burdens, unnecessary burdens, whenever legislators, whenever public administrations, whenever regional, national, or local authorities are acting one way or the other. I think I'm personally a lawyer. Was graduated in the law faculty of Salamanca, Spain. I certainly recommend you to all go there. But as a lawyer, you perfectly understand the need to have legislation. I think legislation is vital for running societies. I think also legislation is very important as a way to drive and to achieve policy objectives. And this, I think, is very important. I think also legislation is very important to push innovation as one of the most important demand-driven tools, but it can also be a way to protect vested interest. And at the same time, it can be a burden. It can be a burden for those that the legislation is targeted at. So we are here very much to understand, first of all, the results of an initiative taken by the three associations that are here. We have also Mrs. Martina Djabalova, member of the European Parliament, so it's certainly an honor for us that you are here. You are part of the European Parliament, and certainly part of the European legislator that is partially responsible for having this good legislation that I was referring to. So I will, but before giving you the floor, Martina, I'll give the floor to the three associations. They are going to present the result of this test. I think I need to start by Petri. Yes? Who is he? Lina?
Yes.
You are the one. So Lina, it's the one who is going to talk about the methodology of this test, and you are the policy director of Eurochambers, and it is certainly a great honor for me to welcome you here and to introduce, first of all, this one. I'll then give the floor to the rest of the speakers. Lina, please, the floor is yours. Can you say that you are the next?
Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to be here in Prague, in the SME Assembly. We all know the importance of the SME test. It builds on the rationale of the think small first principle, and it's an important key tool of the better regulation guidelines. I think I would like to start by asking why the three biggest European organizations have decided to initiate this exercise of the SME test benchmark. I think one of the first reasons is that despite the current crisis, we see that the whole regulatory environment is moving to a continuous business as usual. So we don't see a decline of regulations. We see an increasing number of regulations that are affecting SMEs. The second reason is, despite some negative opinions of the Regulatory Scrutiny Board, we see that several legislations are still being there, which have direct and not direct influence for SMEs. And finally, we also have realized that the SME test is unfortunately not well implemented across all the DGs. For these reasons, Business Europe, Eurochambers, and SME United have decided to join forces to analyze the application of the European Commission SME test. There are, of course, several criteria that are in scope, and there are also some other criteria that are out of scope. What is interesting to analyze is that we have analyzed 26 impact assessments of the legislative initiatives, and they were checked against the 2017 Better Regulation Guidelines in the current EU institutional cycle from 2019 to 2022 across 11 Director Generals. I would like to note that in the same period, in 2021, we already know that the European Commission has published already the Better Regulation 2021, but this is not considered in our analysis, so it is out of the scope. A very important other criteria element is, of course, the SME relevance. So all these 26 impact assessments have been cross-checked and selected according to SME relevance on whether they have a direct or indirect influence for SMEs. We hope that our report would bring, of course, important source of information for the improvement, of course, of the new initiative of the 2021 Better Regulation Guidelines. Regarding the methodology, it follows 4 steps of the SME test. The first one, step 1, is the identification of affected businesses. That step was analyzed with a yes or no, and it was analyzed with a qualitative analysis, so there was no scoring. Step 2, consultation of SME stakeholders and measurement of the impact of SMEs. Both had a score from 0 to 5 points maximum. And step 4 also had a qualitative approach with a yes or no with respect to the assessment of alternative options and mitigating measures. You can see also in the box the whole overall score. We are discussing about 0 to 2 points, extremely poor, 3 to 5 points, poor, 6 points acceptable, 7 to 8 points good, and 9 to 10 very, very good. Of course, in all the steps, we have consulted several documentations. We have consulted the Inception Impact Assessment Report, the impact assessments themselves together with the annexes, the Regulatory Scrutiny Board opinions, and of course the Impact Assessment Executive Summaries and Recommendations. Going maybe a bit into detail with respect to the step 2, of course, there we have taken into consideration the data collection, for example, the period where the public consultation was open, whether it was respected or not, the normal 12 weeks. It was also the possibility for respondents to identify themselves as SME or SME representatives. And we also analyzed other consultation methods, like, for example, meetings with the Commission or other meetings. The second point was accessibility of consultations. So, for example, the availability of consultations in all the EU 24 official languages or 23 without Irish. Third was the presentation of results, whether the views of SMEs were reflected in the impact assessment report, and finally, the use of consultation results, on whether they were in the assessment of the impact of the policy options in the SMEs. The next step, step 3, looked on the measurement of the impact of SMEs, and in particular on the differentiation of the impact on SMEs from the impact of large companies, identification of a certain group of the SME population as part of the analysis, quantification of the impact on SMEs, and finally the measurement of the impact for all policy options or only of the preferred ones. And I'm pausing for the time being, just explaining a bit the methodology that we go for, and I would like to invite Veronique.
Thank you very much. Veronique, please. Veronique is Secretary General of SME United. The floor is yours, Veronique.
Thank you. And also from my side, thank you all for being here. A very important topic, and I think I would also like to thank the team of the 3 organizations who have been analyzing the impact assessments, because it's been a very detailed work and a very committed work. So I think that also has to be said, that a lot of work has been put into this report. I'm now moving forward to the results of the analysis. So first of all, the identification of affected businesses. There we see that out of the 26 impact assessments, only 1 did not consider whether SMEs were affected. I believe that was the minimum wage proposal. And out of 15 out of 26 differentiate really between the distinct size classes, so between micro, small, medium, and big companies. In most of these cases, however, we also see that it's more general considerations, general statistics that are given on SMEs, and that there are no real detailed or more granular assessments being provided. So that's still a point to further improve, and we know that it's often also challenging to find more detailed data, but nevertheless, I think that that's a point that we can still look into on how to move forward. If we then go to the second step, the quality of the consultation of SME stakeholders, there we see that the analysis is quite positive. In 24 out of the 26 impact assessments that we looked at, the 12 weeks period has been respected. However, we have to mention as well that in 16 cases it overlapped with a holiday period, which is challenging, first and foremost, to get input from the ground, and secondly, also for business organizations to then process that information and put that into a general feedback. In 62% of the impact assessments, alternative forms of consultation have been used, such as targeted interviews, panel consultations, conferences, and hearings. And I think a point to mention in a very positive way is that the language regime has improved significantly in comparison to the previous analysis that was made by Eurochambers in 2017. 85%, 22 out of the 26 impact assessments have provided the consultation in the 24 or 23 official languages of the EU. And then maybe a final element there is that almost 40% don't really go into the detail of looking at the impact of the different policy options. And that's also something that I recall that came out of the OECD analysis that was presented, I believe, in June of this year, where indeed it also showed that most of the time the preferred policy option is analyzed quite substantially, but the other policy options are less taken into account. So that's also a point where we propose to go more in detail in the future. If we then look at the third step, the impact of the policy initiatives, there we see that SMEs are most of the time considered to be part of the bigger group of companies in general. And I quote a few justifications. In the climate law, for instance, it was stated that SMEs are not typically active in carbon-intensive sectors, to be discussed. Or what is also an element that was put forward is this measure is likely to lead to limited to no impacts on SMEs, or this measure is likely to lead to weakly negative impacts on SMEs. Of course, that's an easy way out for the DG in question to not have to go too much in detail. We see that even when the impact is analyzed, the findings are rarely in a dedicated part in the impact assessment, but they're more scattered throughout the impact assessment in annexes or in different parts. So it's quite difficult to gather the full picture, let's say. The quantification of the impact has been done only in 10 impact assessments, whereas in consultations it's often requested also to provide data. And again, not providing more detailed information for the different policy options most of the time only explores the specific preferred policy option. A final element that we also see is that sometimes it's also not taking into account the unintended consequences of the policy proposal. So that's also an element that we need to take into account. If we look at a good example, the General Product Safety Regulation gave a very quantified impact for every policy option. On the other hand, the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, gave us an indication that it was impossible to quantify the impact. And then if we go to the last step, the mitigating measures, those are measures to alleviate the burden for SMEs or for companies in general. In the big majority of the proposals, there are no mitigating measures proposed, or they are somewhat unclear. In some cases, they are not put forward because they say that SMEs are not considered to be affected. And most of the time, the analysis is partial, and therefore also the impact was acknowledged, but the mitigating or alternative measures were not proposed. Maybe on this element as well, because if you think about mitigating measures, impact assessments, of course, focus on one proposal. What we see right now, and that's something that the three business organizations here to do have been raising regularly the past few months, is the cumulative impact of legislation and of rules coming into force, meaning companies, of course, don't pick which rules they comply with. They have to comply with all the rules that are affecting their company. And so that cumulative impact is also a point that where we will have a look on how we can further analyze that in the future. I think that I can give the floor to Petri now so that he can present the results.
Thank you very much,
Veronique. The recommendations.
Indeed, the recommendations, Petri Viorio is going to introduce the recommendations. He's the Vice Chair of Entrepreneurship and SME Committee of Business Europe. Petri, certainly the floor is yours to present the recommendations. We'll look forward for these recommendations, indeed.
Thank you, Bonafizio, and thank you, ladies, for good overview of results and methodology. So finally, conclusions and recommendations. Good afternoon, everybody. Very nice that you have had chance to participate today. I am glad to conclude this overview by presenting our joint recommendations on the topic. As it was underlined, while better regulation principles have grown in importance and the Commission is moving to the right direction, the SME test guidelines are still not applied on the regular basis. Our report makes several recommendations which we believe should be taken into consideration to improve the use of SME test. To start with some general guidelines, our first recommendation is a call on all Commission services to apply the SME test guidelines consistently. In this regard, we identified two priority points. First of all, impact assessments should dedicate full, easy to read and clear chapters about the assessment of the impact on SMEs. So what we mean, this is to assure quality and usability of the report and better regulation as final outcome. Secondly, they should differentiate and identify different size classes of SMEs, where we mean... Press? Okay, yeah. So, should identify different size classes of the SMEs, meaning micro and mid-sized, small, and other kind of SMEs. Like we know, there are very different needs, very different characteristics on these company types. Then, secondly, on the consultation part, it is important to guarantee the 12-week consultation period on SME test. And if this overlaps with the holidays, this should be extended. Last point about consultation is the need to consider the SME sector consultation results as integral part of impact assessments. This should be clearly presented and guarantee a better calibration of the policy options. And this should be based on technical feedback provided by SME and SME representatives, such as organizations here today. And then on the measurement of the impact on SMEs. In most cases, the impact on SMEs is measured only for preferred policy options. Here we believe the all policy options, costs and benefits included on SMEs must be systematically measured. It is also important to add that assumptions do not replace a thorough analysis. And linked to this, to evaluate the real impact of policy, quantification with concrete figures must be more systematic. A quantitative analysis provides more useful insights on the real impact of the policy. When made impossible due to the lack of data, the impact assessment should clearly explain the obstacles encountered. Then the last points about alternative options and mitigating measures. According to better regulation guidelines, such measures should be considered whenever there is a negative impact on SMEs compared to large companies. This is what the guidelines say. However, we notice that impact assessments do not pay sufficient attention to indirect impact on SMEs when considering mitigating measures. There are examples like taxonomy or due diligence or some other files, where the SME impact comes via supply chains or financiers. We all know these files well. To get it right, the best to collect relevant and usable data and information should be done, because partial or missing data put at risk the validity of the analysis. And like Veronique already pointed out, it is also very important, I know this is Bonafizio's favorite one, to pay attention to this cumulative impact assessment regarding different initiatives, the whole big picture that has impact on SMEs. And as Martina will continue after me, we also have recommendation to Parliament included, and that is to establish working group, horizontal working group regarding better regulation in the Parliament. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the three associations for having presented. I'll now give the floor to Martina. Martina Davalova is being member of the European Parliament since 2014, if I'm not mistaken. You are part of the Renew Europe political party and certainly coordinator of the Committee on Industry, Research and Energy, vice chair of the Committee on Budgetary Control. She is also co-chair of the SME Intergroup of the European Parliament and member of Renew Europe SME Task Force. You are a great defender of SMEs. It is certainly a pleasure to have you here. You've also heard that certainly the recommendations are addressed to the European Commission, but not only. I think it's important to underline the role of the European legislator, including obviously the Parliament. We shouldn't forget the member states in the whole exercise about burden on SMEs. So, Martina, the floor is yours. What is your take-up of the presentation made by the three associations?
Thank you so much, Bonnie, and thank you for having me. Well, I have a lot of notes now, and I hope that I will manage to go through them, and I hope that we will create a kind of discussion and debate with everybody who is following us. Well, thanks to SME Assembly Secretariat and as well to Lina, Veronique and Petri for the invitation to join you in this masterclass. I must say that I'm always happy to have opportunity to speak in SME Assembly, and I'm even happier if I can share the stage with you. It's always great. And okay, you said it, I am a big fan of SMEs. I still consider myself entrepreneur, even if I am in the parliament, and I am standing by small and medium-sized enterprises exceptionally in these difficult times. But of course, we are talking now about the SME test. For me, this was always a very important tool for supporting SMEs. And we really need to build on this think small first principle. And the European Commission subscribes to this principle. It is great. I must say that I am really impressed that Business Europe, Bureau Chambers and SME United have joined forces to do this analysis together. I think this is great because it's so important to see you all together and see you on the same page, analyzing the same needs for SMEs. So thank you for that. You are calling for concrete actions. You are calling for better regulatory environment for all SMEs you are so greatly representing here today. So what are my takeaways? What can help to improve the situation? As you rightly pointed out in the policy recommendation of your report, of course, constant application of think small first principle by the European and, allow me to say this, by the national legislators as well. So maybe the next step would be interesting to analyze what is happening at national level. I would absolutely encourage you to do that because that would be very interesting. Then, of course, not necessary we can exclude SMEs by legislation when this would entail losing opportunities. But we need to give them simplified requirements. So let's not push always just to exclude them, but let's find a way how to simplify the requirements for SMEs. And of course, we need to give to SMEs buffer periods as well, a kind of delay for them for the application of new norms, to have time to gather knowledge, to gather skills, to gather good practices. And then, of course, I want to highlight the following, as I already said, dear colleagues from the Commission, and this doesn't go only to DG GROW, it goes to all DGs. Please, let's think small first and act accordingly, always. And I am underlining all DGs. Bonnie, and you know what I mean. In other words, what I'm kindly asking the Commission to not come to the Parliament from now on with a new legislative proposals without having it passed through the SME test. And this is something I asked officially in the plenary in September when we had the State of SME Union debate at the beginning of the September, and it was my main message. Please never ever come to this house, I mean in Parliament, with legislation without passing it through SME test. This is my main message. And what we have done in the Parliament, okay, we contributed quite a lot to SME test, we contributed to better regulation, but what we did to improve the situation? We were stressing that the Commission should not only perform the SME test more systematically, but should also provide for a mandatory SME test where this is applicable. Then we can talk legally what does it mean where this is applicable. But I would like to see SME test mandatory where it is necessary and applicable. Such a test, of course, should identify how simplification could be done in terms of costs and benefits. And where possible, we should have clear recommendations to avoid unnecessary administrative or regulatory burden for SMEs. And then, one thing that I really want to mention, we need ex-post evaluations as well. They are absolutely important to assess the impact of legislations on citizens and businesses and SMEs, of course, whereby special attention should be given to our SMEs. So what we were doing in the Parliament, we were calling on the Commission and on the Member States to provide feedback on the Commission's cost and benefits estimates after implementation. So let's not forget this part after implementation. Looking at your report, okay, it was a great highlight. I am not going to repeat main findings because I could subscribe all of them. I am really happy that you put them on the paper and we can together co-sign them, I would say. But let me mention some of them. I would be very happy if we can dedicate full chapter to the assessment of the impact on SMEs. That would be absolutely great. Second, I fully support you in the analysis of cumulative impact. This is something that we cannot forget, so cumulative impact. Third, as I already said, I will mention it once again, impact assessments need to be regularly revised because I think that some information, some costs and benefits evolves continuously, so we need to revise them. And third, I agree with you that the European Parliament should play a more consistent role in the assessment and evaluation of shortcomings. So yes, you suggested setting up permanent working group on better regulation. I am not a big fan of new agencies, of new working groups, of new committees. I am not the biggest fan, but I see the moment of need of this, absolutely. And I can assure you that we are already doing it, because even our SME intergroup, which I am co-chairing with Angelika Wenzig from EPP, it's so cross groups and cross committees that we are managing to be already like safeguards of what is going on with better regulation. And what I really want, I would like to call for everybody here to start to think horizontally and not to work in silos. And we all know that this is what we are doing everywhere, in the European Parliament, in the European Commission, even at the national level. We are very often working in silos. So maybe this is where the cumulative impact analysis could help a lot. So more than, if we would be all able to work horizontally and not to work in silos, we would not need a working group on better regulation, but probably we needed to push it a little bit further. So that would be all from my side. And, you know, I just wanted to say at the end, what I really appreciate of this masterclass, that there is no time for reciprocal critics and saying you are doing this, you are not doing this, we should do better, you should give this, and no. I think that we need sincere, concrete collaboration between main stakeholders, and I count here European Commission, European Parliament, and SMEs associations, and thank you guys for representing so well SMEs. So thank you again to Business Europe, Eurochambers, and SME United. And I am here to listen to what more we can do from the position of the European Parliament, and I'm absolutely open to do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So it's a bit curious for me, obviously, as moderator, but at the same time, sort of representative of the services of the Commission to be part of the panel. Certainly, you have raised many interesting issues regarding the need to ensure that the legislation is clear, that the burden is well analyzed and properly addressed. Before giving the floor to the audience to certainly put forward questions to all of us, to the stakeholders, to Martina from the European Parliament, let me also recall a little bit the work that the European Commission has done so far in order to improve the better regulation agenda. I think you mentioned it before, Lina, about the better regulation proposals and work that and guidance that we have in 2021. This analysis and this test has not focused on initiative that has been adopted after that precise moment. This guidance in 2021 introduced what we call the SME filter. So this is a new tool that tries to identify those initiatives that are highly relevant or relevant, that are particularly relevant for SMEs, with the idea that then the impact assessment is done proportionally to this relevance. So meaning that if an initiative is highly relevant, then obviously we have an impact assessment that takes really into account the different type of SMEs by sector, by size, that also carries out SME panels and tries to identify as much as possible this cost. So this is an initiative that has already been put forward in 2021, has really started working in 2022. We have already identified a series of measures that are highly relevant. What we usually do is we share this initiative with SME envoys and stakeholders to receive an initial feedback once the call for the evidence of a new proposals is being published. So with the idea to start receiving this this knowledge from SMEs to try to understand whether specific initiatives are particularly highly relevant. And also it's a win-win for SMEs, stakeholders and SMEs in general, because it may allow you to provide this data that also will be needed whenever doing the impact assessment. So that's something that we have at the level of SME as from 2021. Regarding the ex-post analysis, indeed, Martin, I think you are right about also analyzing and doing this evaluation and analysis of cost on SMEs. We have this Fit for Future platform that I guess you all know about it. This is a unique opportunity as well to assess specific proposals of the Commission. So this is led by Vice President Šefčovič. And every year, and this is the period where we are identifying the possible proposals that are going to be subject to this assessment for next year, we will define this work program together with the stakeholders, together with those representatives that are part of this platform. Just to give you one example, there was an assessment of the late payment directive some time ago, led by the SME envoy, the Dutch one, and as result of that analysis, we now have this assessment or this announcement by the President of the European Commission last September, identifying the need for a revision of the late payment directive. So this is something that is working there. It is there to be worked. It is something where I would also be pleading to stakeholders to take it seriously, to work, to identify those initiatives that are particularly cumbersome for SMEs, because I think this is a great opportunity for us to assess, linking to what Martina was saying. I have also noted some elements which are certainly very important and which I think could be subject to this relief package that was announced by the Commissioner this morning. You have, I think, underlined the need for perhaps visibility. You have mentioned that the elements regarding the assessment on SMEs is scattered all around impact assessment, and there is not enough visibility there. Certainly that there is no quantitative analysis on the costs. All that sometimes the analysis is partial, that there should be a little bit more effort in collecting this data, right? I think indeed mandatory SME tests were applicable, and in a way this connects what I was saying before. The SME filter should help identify where we all need to put our efforts. I think it will be very difficult to address and to look into all impact assessment. We have to be selective, and there where it is applicable, and the SME filter is a tool for that, I think we really have to put all our efforts in trying to get this data. Very important, the cumulative impact analysis of a particular legislation on a particular SMEs, but perhaps also with regard to other legislative instruments that are parallel to that one. Cumulative impact assessment, very difficult to calculate, very difficult to carry it out, but I guess probably we all have to do an effort in trying to identify from a qualitative point of view what are the type of impacts, what are the type of obligations, what are the type of obligations and the burden that is imposed on SMEs. So that would provide us a little bit of understanding of trying to be a little bit more concrete of what do we mean whenever we say that there is a burden on SMEs. I will certainly come back after the questions, but I think now is the moment for you to raise questions, to be critical to us. I think it is important to shake the stakeholders, but also the Commission, so I want you to be pushy. Don't hesitate about that. I have a question, a gentleman over there, then you, then Celine from the OECD, so I have 3 questions already.
Yes, hello.
Present yourself.
Yeah.
Present yourself and.
I will present myself. Stefan Moritz, Secretary General of European Entrepreneurs CEA-PME. First of all, congrats for the great work that you did, Business Europe, SME United, and Eurochambres. Thank you. That's very helpful. I would like to just maybe make one suggestion and one political observation. Suggestion, I very much appreciate the last proposal that that Petri met said regarding to involve the European Parliament here in the impact assessments. I would say in a good democratic system, checks and balances, one institution controls the other, is maybe a good thing. Why not involving not a working group but the research department of the European Parliament? That would give input also to the MEPs on future legislation to learn from maybe errors committed in the past or good practices also. That could be very helpful because that in this way also the methodology would not be so scattered because between, I don't know, 11 DGs and the people have to always learn again these impact assessments. We would get a little bit of standardization in the process. Secondly, for what regards the comments of Mrs. Dlabayova regarding the exceptional legislation or delays for SMEs or special exemptions, I must say, although I normally support very much your political positions, in this case I must say SMEs are a little bit the seismographs of the economy and seismographs, and I don't think that there should be a legislation that differentiates between SMEs and bigger companies. What is not good for the economy, and that means what is not good for the SMEs, should also not be generally law or become a law, at least from our point of view, because at the end it will always be in the cascade process through outsourcing and everything involve the small medium-sized enterprises in a way or another. So let's think always if a law is economically viable, yeah? And then maybe it makes more sense if there is these exemptions at the end will not make the things really better. So.
Thank you very much. I don't know, perhaps I'll give the floor to the gentleman here in the third row. Perhaps he was first.
Okay, good evening. My name is Bohumil Šmucer. I'm from Ministry of Industry and Trade of the Czech Republic. And instead of continuing of presentation, I really have two questions, two particular technical questions. How the sample or the pool of SMEs for the SME test is selected, the question number one. And how is it, if at all, is verified that participating companies are real SMEs? Thank you.
Oh. Next question.
Very well. My name is Andy. I'm a policy advisor in the European Parliament. And I just want to make a statement and then also a question. So we are finding ourselves in a continuous state of crisis mode. And yet, instead of giving SMEs space to breathe, we cover them with an avalanche of regulation. And just for comparison, if we go on like that, by 2030 we will have 5 in and 1 out, and not 1 in, 1 out. So my question here is the SME test for the Commission just like a box-ticking exercise, or how precisely does it work internally?
It's a very good question. Next, next one, Celine. Celine, she was there before the lady.
Well, thank you very much. I'm Celine Kaufmann from the OECD. I want to first congratulate you on this panel and the work of the joint institutions, because I think it's very valuable work that you're doing. I have actually 2 questions for you. The first one is, or 3 questions. One is maybe for you, Bonnie, because I think it's a very important panel But it would be good as well to hear from the services what is their challenges in carrying out the SME test. So having, that perspective as well in the discussion, or maybe having interviews from the three organizations of the services of what was, the issues that they met when they were developing the SME test would be helpful. Then I was wondering, because of your study of this regulatory impact assessments that you did you consider, for example, you rated the consultation relatively high? Did you have a look at the forward-looking plan that the Commission is providing? Because we know that what is bothering as well SMEs is the lumpy, process around legislation, is not knowing what's going to come up. And there is a forward-looking plan. So how, did you consider that? And then we know that services have a lot of impacts to look into, including, for example, competitiveness impact. And there are SME elements to that. I suspect, at least, that SMEs are part of the competitiveness of the national economy. Have you had a look at these collateral impacts that are being looked into when a regulatory impact assessment is being carried out, and the SME component of that? Because I think it would be very relevant and avoid working in silos like we were mentioning. And I would be remiss not to mention that 2 weeks ago we actually published our SME annex to our regulatory impact assessments. So a lot of what you were mentioning are really in line with that, obviously. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I will take, yeah, please, the gentleman over here, and then.
Thank you very much to the panel. That was a very interesting discussion. I would like the Commission to take on board not just what you've heard for yourselves, but also I think we struggle with this among national governments and national parliaments, and that we would like to see this come out of the semester process, that you check on our own parliaments. I discussed this with Veronique the week before last, but I have been asked to comment in Ireland, for example. We are going to bring in domestic violence leave. I understand now 10 days paid leave by SMEs for victims of domestic violence, which is very hard to deal with. But I've also been asked to comment on the possibility of bringing in paid leave for employees whose pets die. So that's the direction that people are thinking now, and I think at least not simply one in, one out, but when people are thinking of new legislation, they should be, or regulation, they should be identifying the obsolete regulation. They should be saying which ones are going to come out. We can't just have a situation where parliamentarians in Europe or in the member states go, I legislate, therefore I am. To repeal legislation is a good thing to do as well. It's a sign that we're moving ahead, and we would like you to think of that as part of the process.
Thank you very much. I think I have a last, and then before I give the floor to my colleagues, and I may also answer some of the easy questions put forward.
Hello, everyone. I am Abigail from the Chamber of Small and Medium Enterprises in Malta. I have a bit of an existential question for you. Is the European Commission the right body to conduct SME tests? Isn't it obvious that there is potentially a bias and a direction that the result of the tests indicate if the Commission itself is doing them? Isn't it possibly also very evident that there aren't the right skills and the right tools and the right resources to be able to conduct the SME test? And this is something that we don't see just looking at the European Commission, we see it also at national level. And we can compare that SME tests exercises done by independent entities that are knowledgeable in doing certain work are done with higher quality. When they are done in-house, there is an obvious bias and there is not enough detail, and it is just a tick box exercise. That's all. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. I'll let my colleagues on stage perhaps to respond first. That's the advantage of being a moderator. So I don't know who wants to address. There are a number of questions. I will certainly address those that are a little bit more addressed to the Commission later. Don't know who wants to start.
Yeah,
Lina.
I think I would like to. Well, most of them were actually for the Commission. So, but I will try. But I will try to answer the question by OECD, because you mentioned the forwarding outlook, and actually this is exactly what we try to do in our analysis. We didn't consider the strategic foresight, because strategic foresight is part of the 2021 better regulation, and that component was not in the previous 2017. And by the way, I'm also very much interested in your results, so happy to, let's say, work together on the next version. So I'm pausing for a moment.
Good. Tina.
Can you hear me? Yes. Well, I don't think that you would accept to moderate this session if you would know how many questions are going to the Commission. But I am curious about the answers as well, I must say. So I don't need to do written questions and plenary questions in the Parliament, but we will have answers here. Thank you all for the questions. I have a couple of comments. To Stefan Moritz, I wanted to ask, maybe we can discuss it later on. You are talking, again, you are repeating what I said, involvement of the European Parliament in impact assessment, in all the procedure. I'm interested to know, how do you imagine this involvement? If it will be like single MEPs working in a working group, or commenting on SME test, commenting on impact assessment, because that's a very tricky point. You know that sometimes our house, it's maybe the craziest one of the institutions, so it can be counterproductive sometimes. But I would be interested to know how you feel it. And for the legislation for SMEs, I didn't intend different legislation for SMEs, not at all. I intended to be careful about the requirements we are giving on the SMEs, and maybe to consider some buffer periods, because there is a difference of the way of adaptation of SMEs. But I absolutely don't advocate for different legislation for SMEs. And there was a very interesting question by Andy on crises and avalanche of legislation. This is exactly why I would love to have this analysis on cumulative impact, because that would be very interesting. And by the way, I am convinced that this situation is there because we are working in the silos, because we are not working horizontally. And this is happening everywhere, because I can imagine that as committees of the European Parliament are eager to work on some new legislation, and they don't think about the other committees working on difficult legislation as well, the same is happening in the European Commission between DGs. So once we stop to work in the silos, we could even stop this avalanche of, because this happened in the Parliament. We were saying from ITRE committee, hey guys in ENVI, please don't do this, because now we are giving a really big burden to SMEs, so please stop a little bit this directive. But the guys in ENVI said, no, we want to work on something, so we are working on this. So we have to be careful how we put this in balance, and we should stop to work in silos, I think.
I agree.
Both institutions.
I agree. Veronique. Yes.
Quite a loud voice, but nevertheless, I think also for the online, it's better to have the microphone. Maybe because you asked also some elements, Celine, on the forward-looking, on the cumulative aspects, and so on and so on. What we did now is really focus on the impact assessments that were there, and really have a look on how they were conducted and what we could propose to make them even stronger towards the future. So we didn't go outside of that box for once. We were thinking in that box. And I think what Stefan also mentioned and what Martina clarified, the idea, of course, is to develop legislation based on the think small first principle, making sure that the smallest companies can comply. And I recall also what Celine also mentioned last week in a discussion. You also have to be careful that when you start exempting companies, you also risk creating a threshold for them to further grow. Because then if they are exempted and then at a certain point they have to comply, then you have a a difficulty. So that's why we have been saying, and I think I can speak on all of us here, that think small first and act accordingly. Thank you, Martina. Is the way forward for developing legislation in the future.
Thank you. A lot of things have been said already, but perhaps to add something, well, about this Commission's forward-looking agenda, for instance, I think that it's very important that we together focus on delivering concrete issues that support SMEs in SME relief packets, for instance, 5 to 10 issues that are concrete now. Late payment directive is not packets yet, so that's one part of it, but we need to deliver information regarding this in this, let's say, critical situation where our SMEs try to survive from crisis to crisis now, energy and before this pandemic. And very important as well, this silo issue. I think this is a great example when we have definitely jumped out from the silos in SME community. This is a clear message that is easy to understand, and we all share that, and I think that also Commission and Parliament are quite well on the same page based on today's discussions. So, but this is also national level. I mean, it's the collateral impact or side impact. I think we need to focus on national level as well to, let's say, improve our impact assessment. That's what we are looking at, for instance, in Finland. We don't have very well functioning or let's say standard impact assessment mechanisms on member state level. That's definitely one issue, and we need to also focus on how to implement good regulation national level, because that's the only way to guarantee SMEs the single market where you can scale up business maximum level. And that's very important because we know competition with our global scale is not getting easier, so let's strengthen the single market. That's one very important issue, and do this by better regulation but also good implementation on national level.
Thank you. So perhaps it's now my turn to, not as a moderator, but also as representative of the Commission. I mean, the fact that we are here discussing about the SME test, about better regulation agenda in the Commission and in the Parliament, it's also a signal from our side, from the side of the Commission, that we are taking this exercise very seriously. I mentioned before the work that has been done in 2021, and indeed I am convinced, and probably OECD has some information about that the impact assessment that are carried out in the Commission are probably the best in the world. So having said that, of course there is a lot of room for maneuver, there is a lot of room for improvement, and I think it is extremely important that we are able to gather as much as information whenever we are doing this impact assessment to analyze the possible impact. So for me, it's not a ticking box exercise. I think that is a question. Secondly, I think we do have a system in the Commission where the impact assessment are analyzed and assessed by a regulatory scrutiny board, that it is highly independent, with members and experts that are independent, and they have on various occasions issued 2 negative opinions on impact assessment has been carried out. This is publicly available. This is then publicly available to everybody once the decision is being taken. Then obviously this is a proposal from the European Commission, goes to the European Parliament and the Council, and this is publicly available to everybody, right? So having said that, I think it is indeed, we need to have an effort in trying to make it a little bit more visible. What are the impacts on those that are the targeted or possibly a targeted users or targeted of the legislation. You mentioned, Veronique, about think small first. at the end of the day, they are the users. They are we have to have a little bit more a user-driven approach whenever we draft legislation. And the process to draft legislation, Celine, you mentioned it before. What is the experience of the services? Well, in fact, my unit and ourselves, we are now going through this experience ourselves whenever we are now presenting the revision of the Late Payment Directive. It's not an easy exercise because you are under a lot of political pressure to achieve some objectives. So indeed, you need to collect this data, and sometimes this data is not easy to be collected. Usually it takes time to carry out a study, and sometimes even the users themselves, in this case the SME, might not necessarily have. So it's not an easy exercise, and it's an exercise that should normally take some years if you really want to have a proper impact assessment. And sometimes the political pressure is that there, in order to provide relief or in order to achieve certain political objectives, because the political pressure is there. This is always going to be there. So what I think we all have to do, and that is also the reason of this seminar, is try to improve a system that, as I said before, is probably one of the best in the world, but can certainly be improved. And my unit is committed to work towards ensuring that SME Test is carried out properly, at least for those initiatives that are highly relevant or relevant for SMEs. Because it is not about introducing a moratorium of legislation. It's about taking into account the data. It's about assessing the impact. It's also seeing how a specific legislation can be positive for SMEs. And providing visibility. I think one of the things that we are lacking is providing this visibility towards the outside world on how specific legislation can be implemented, or what is the impact on SMEs. I think this visibility for me is vital. And I also take note of the importance to carry out as much as possible a quantification on the impact assessment. If we are not able to quantify, at least to provide a qualitative assessment, a cumulative qualitative assessment of a series of provisions on SMEs. And I think this is an effort by all of us. I mean, we can do certain things, but you as stakeholders, I will be pleading you as well to provide this data. So I think this is what I wanted to say. There was another question regarding national level, right? Indeed, I mean, I said it before. I mean, it's the famous golden plate, gold plating. Thank you. Golden plating. New legislation that is introduced at national level, and obviously we should take into account one of the principles of the treaty of the European Union, which is subsidiarity. Europe is not only the Commission. Europe is not only the European institutions. Europe, we are all Europe, but also member states, national authorities should also be responsible for what they propose. It's not only for the Commission to be chasing them up. Whenever there might be an obstacle to trade, whenever there is an obstacle to the principles of the European Union, we and the internal market in particular, we do have what is called, for instance, the single market enforcement tool, and we also, as guardian of the treaty, we are going to be there to check and control. But that is a responsibility as well by member states, and you should be raising that issue as well to the member states, and not refusing the responsibility. I think I'm here standing up in favor of better regulation. And this is what I wanted to say. I don't know if there are any more interventions from your side, any more questions. I think we have a little bit more time, although we have run out of time, but Lina?
No, I think it is just a matter of commitment. I think that since we are all here sitting, I think we should at least have a kind of a next steps, a kind of a renewal of this type of meeting that we have just had today, and tried maybe to renew this, let's say, commitment of these recommendations that came from the report, maybe discuss it a bit more concrete.
Building bridges, as
build
Martina.
the bridges, and yeah, we do not want our report to be forgotten in a week.
No. For sure not.
Maybe if I can also give a concluding idea. I think from the side of the business organizations, the whole exercise was also with the aim of creating rules that are applicable in practice and that achieve the objectives in the easiest way possible. So not against regulation, but making good regulation, smart regulation, and that's a joint responsibility of all of us, I think, in this room and in the institutions and the bubble around it, making sure that what we conceive is also feasible, and that it contributes to a better society and a better world, to be a bit idealistic now.
Thank you. Just very shortly, I think you can count on me. And you can count on me as well that we will be watching from European Parliament, the European Commission. And I am sure that all stakeholders will be watching us both institutions. And I hope that next year, when we will have SME Union plenary debate, I will not need to be critical, I will not need to remind to the European Commission to do SME test regularly and mandatory.
Good. I think
I am watching you.
I think your pressure is certainly a vitamin and proteins and hydrocarbons for the work that we are doing. So certainly we need your food and your good advice, and very much. And this is your role. You are voted by citizens, and you do have to do that. So for me, it's certainly precious, the work that you are doing. Thank you very much to everybody for the test. Martina, certainly for your participation and your commitment for SMEs. And thank you very much for the audience to be so outspoken with questions and comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you.